Contrary to popular belief, there are many conservation success stories in marine fisheries. I started my journey in fisheries research at a university in Italy. And the situation in the Mediterranean was quite depressing. And so were our classes in fisheries management. I had a growing belief that institutions could do nothing about illegal fishing, and that their efforts to control the efforts that was going into the ocean by controlling the amount of boats or the gears that the fishers were using were just doomed to fail, because fishers would find some creative way to go around the regulation. And then I came to Iceland, and I saw that the picture could also look different. Actually, here the harvest rates tend to be, especially in recent years, within safe biological limits. Yes, we are not yet at an ecosystem approach to fisheries, and we're striving to get there, but it was definitely not as depressing as it was in the Mediterranean. In Iceland, fisheries are managed by one solution that is very prevalent in the toolkit of the fisheries management, and it has gotten, and I would say, disproportionate amount of attention. The solution is called individual transferable quota. The Icelanders in the crowd may be very familiar with this approach to fisheries management, but not everybody may know the approach, so I will briefly explain it. There are roughly 3 steps to the procedure. First, you will establish a total allowable catch. So you will say, what is the output that we want from the system, and what is a safe harvesting rate so that the populations can persist into the future, the fish populations. And then you will distribute percentages of this total allowable catch among harvesters. You will give them to the fishers of which you will think will do some good job in harvesting the fish. And then you implement a market. All these steps are optional, but they often come in this kind of package that is called individual transferable quota. The main argument of why this should align to sustainability of harvesting fish stocks is that it should align economic incentives to the sustainability of the fish stock. In common language, if I own a share of quota in a stock that is rebuilding, I will be able to harvest more in the future and make more money. Griffin will give a talk on how there are maybe reasons to doubt this reasoning. Past empirical research on this management method has shown that there are less fluctuations in stocks that are managed in this way, and that there are fewer landings collapses in such fisheries. It is regrettable that this research does not tend to distinguish between the 3 attributes of the management procedure. So we do not know if marine stocks persist because of the total allowable catch. We do not know if landings are less likely to collapse because of the individual allocations, or if it is because of the markets. It's just slightly distracting. Thank you, Vala. There could also be other ways, at least anecdotally, on how to sustainably manage fisheries. On the northeast coast in the US, fisheries have a track record of being managed by days at sea, and at the same time the amount of boats or effort is restricted for the fishers. And they have been able to keep harvest rates at sustainable levels in that way. So why do we even care? If ITQ systems outperform open access, or if they outperform average systems on average, why do we even care? Why don't we just implement individual transferable quota everywhere? One solution fits all, right? That's what we learn in school. There is one reason. That it is that in many of these systems, there will be unequal outcomes. if you exclude current and future harvesters from harvesting a resource, there will be winners and losers to the process. There are just legal and ethical issues that are concerned with this process. The first and foremost and most controversial issue is the first allocation. To who will you give the fishing quota? In most of these systems, this has been more of an afterthought. The transition from an effort system to an individual transferable quota system is mostly seen as something that is a kind of like a hard thing to go through, and the fishers will have to restrain their fishing. So you will just give it to the people that were already harvesting the most so that they can sustain their businesses, right? This is called allocating based on fishing history. It tends to be that this quota is only allocated to the vessel owner. So the vessel owner is in quite a good position, right? They can sell their quota, exit the fishery, go to a tropical island. It's much better than being on Iceland. Or they can or they can buy more quota and establish a really nice fishing business. And it's likely going to be very profitable because harvesters are excluded from the fishery and you can accumulate rents. The other participants in the fishery have less agency in this situation, right? They will hope that the vessel owner is not going to do anything with the quota, or they will have to leave or find some other way of employment. These are the shippers, the vessel crew, the process plant employees. Another attribute of this system is that the markets tend to work in this way that the quota tend to consolidate in the hands of fewer owners. So there will be less participants in the fishery, and overall there will be less jobs. So one other controversial aspect is that it leaves rural areas with fewer jobs. So I went during my PhD on a hunt for Icelandic data. And it's really difficult to get data on these systems because it is very based on ownership and companies, and lots of this data is proprietary. In Iceland, we have the luxury that at least some of this data is available. And we can predict the current ownership of fishing quota and the amount of quota that has been bought by the initial allocations that have been freely gifted. So what does this mean for new entrants? There are not so many new entrants in a system like this. And even if we would implement an auction market now, a new entrant would have to compete with companies that have already accumulated a lot of wealth in a system that has been giving them exclusive access. That's why I'm saying that these considerations should be considered before implementing a system, and they should not be an afterthought 30 years after a system has already been in place. We have a lack of data to compare different fisheries management systems. As I said in the beginning, we don't know what attribute is actually causing the fact that these systems outperform open access effort systems. So is it just the cap on output that maybe doesn't need to be accompanied by such unequal outcomes and by the winners and the losers? Access to new resources in the current world is becoming increasingly scarce, and inequality is ever growing. So we need to consider these aspects of a management regime at the start when we're designing the system and not 30 years later. And I'm not just saying this because Iceland made this mistake when they implemented the fisheries management systems, but this type of management is currently still implemented in many places in the world. In the first article of the Icelandic Fisheries Management Act, it stated that fish stocks around Iceland are the common property of the Icelandic nation, and that no private property rights are given to the harvesters. This has not been interpreted exactly in this way, but it would be a good start on implementing an ethical and equitable fisheries management plan. I have spoken to a manager on the northeast coast of the United States, and she said that they are trying to manage access to their fisheries as the access to a public park. So there are limits on how the park is used. We have restrictions and regulations, but they also guarantee that everybody that wants to can enjoy the park. Maybe we do not want our fisheries to be exactly like a public park, because also people will need to be secure that they can build some form of business. But I would argue that we don't want them to be private gardens either. Thank you.